Okay, welcome everyone to my thesis presentation. I'm still working on it, but I think I have some things to show you. So I looked for the effects of noise on the acoustic behavior of killer whales in Iceland. I will start with an introduction, material and methods. I will combine results and discussion, and then a short conclusion. So the ocean is not and never was completely quiet. There are many natural sound sources such as fish, whales, but also storms and rains that contribute to noise in the ocean. But since the Industrial Revolution, there are also many anthropogenic noises such as shipping, oil drilling, seismic surveys, ocean construction works, all contributing to this ocean background noise. And all these human noises, they result in an overall rise in anthropogenic noise, and that they can have serious consequences for marine animals, because many marine animals, such as whales and dolphins, they use sound as primary sense. And for example, masking of sound, behavioral disturbance, but even hearing loss and strandings are examples of such consequences found on whales and dolphins. So it is important to further investigate what kind of impacts this noise can have, ensure to mitigate these impacts, and ensure the future of all species in the ocean. And likely it's likely that in the future anthropogenic activities and thus noise in the ocean will keep increasing, and this across all frequencies, as we can see on this graph. In orange we see the human activities, and in green, we see the animal sounds, and both overlap, and human activities are mostly louder than human sounds, than animal sounds. In my study, I focused on killer whales, or orcas, and they as well use sound as primary sense. Whistles, echolocation clicks, and pulsed calls are used for communication, foraging, navigating, etc. Killer whales as a species, they have a lot of different prey type, but the ones in Iceland mainly eat herring, and they use a special hunting technique. And compared to some other populations across the world, the ones in Iceland travel in silence, and they vocalize a lot during foraging. So it's clear that sound is important for many reasons. So as I said before, the anthropogenic activities and noise in the ocean is likely to continue, and has consequences on individual but also population level. So it's important to further investigate and mitigate these impacts. So as a first in Iceland, I looked at possible changes in the vocalization of the killer whales in the Vestmannaeyjar, and I hypothesized that killer whales in this area will change their acoustic behavior as a response on elevated background noise. So last summer, I went to the Vestmannaeyjar, which is southwest of Iceland, and this area is a known herring spawning ground in this period, and a lot of killer whales are spotted then. Two types of data were collected, visual and acoustic data. Visual surveys were done on a land station, as you can see here, and binoculars and a theodolite were used to collect coordinates from vessels, but also killer whales in the area. And we also recorded extra information about the vessels, such as size and type. Acoustic data was collected by the use of two bottom-moored acoustic recorders, and you can see the setup here. And these were deployed throughout most of the study period, and they were recording sounds continuously. So here you can see the study area, the land station was located here from where we had a great view on this area. And both acoustic recorders were deployed, one here and one here. And for information, I only used recordings from this one because it has it was most centered. So from now on, I will only focus on the acoustic data. So we sent all the sound files we retrieved from the acoustic recorder to Canada, where someone from JASCO used an automatic whistle detector to detect killer whale calls. And from those detections, I only selected fundamental calls from high quality, and I did this in Raven Pro. Here you can see how a call can look like. In total, I selected 300 high quality calls, and I must say that I only looked at calls or at days that could be matched with coordinates retrieved from the land station. From these high quality calls, I gathered 7 parameters such as maximum frequency, minimum frequency, and delta time. And besides, MATLAB was used to measure noise levels, background noise levels, that were correlated to the selected calls, and I did this across 14 frequency bands or tolls and also broadband. So a toll is quite a narrow frequency, so it can be this narrow. And you really measure the noise level within this short part, whereas broadband is more, it has a wider frequency range. And then I put both call parameters and noise levels in one text file, which I opened in RStudio for statistical analysis. Firstly, I clustered the data. So I clustered the calls into groups, and I used a 30-minute interval between 2 calls as a threshold, and I did this for independence. I checked and corrected the call parameters, and I used VIFs, or variance inflation factors, to check for correlation within the tolls, and the ones with a VIF higher than 3 were removed. The four remaining frequency bands were then used as explanatory variables in the MANOVA, and the call parameters were response variables. And I only found a significant effect on maximum and center frequency. So maximum and center frequency were then used together with number of inflection points, another call parameter, in GEEs to test for the effects of noise levels. A GEE is a generalized estimating equation that accounts for clustering and correlation, so it was ideal for my data set. And I used backward model selection to get the most robust models. Sorry. Now I will show some interesting results or interesting findings. I know it's quite small, but here on the x-axis you can see the noise level, the measured noise levels of toll 250 hertz, so it's a really low frequency band, and it goes from 65 to 85, and on the y-axis you see the maximum frequency from all the calls. So this is a scatter plot with regression line, and you can see that the regression line is almost horizontal, and you know that this means that there's barely any effect. And from the GEE, I know that this was an increase from 1 hertz, and an increase is in line with what Gospich found in 2016. He found that bottlenose dolphins increased their whistle frequency when there was elevated noise in low frequencies. So, and this toll is also a low frequency. However, he found increases in terms of kilohertz, whereas I only found an increase of 1 hertz, which is really small. But as I said, it only goes from 65 to 85, which is quite low. It's quite low in terms of noise. So maybe the killer whales had no need to adjust their call parameters because there was not really high noise. There was absence of high noise levels. And this possible lack of high background noise can also be seen here. Here we see the density of the background noise levels measured across all 300 calls. And from the frequency bands that I used in my analysis, so we have 250 hertz, so the one that was on the previous slide as well. And then we have 1.25 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, which is a high frequency, and then the broadband. So on the x-axis, we can see the measured noise levels, and it goes from 60 to 120. And if we look at the 251 that we saw in the previous slide as well, we see that most calls had a noise level below 80 decibels, and this kind of corresponds with low noise levels, or even ambient noise. And the maximum noise level measured was even below 90 decibels, which is still kind of low, because I hope you can see, as we can see here, vessels such as large fishing vessels, small boats, container ships, they easily emit noise levels above 120 decibels in such low frequency ranges. And here we see I don't even have 120 decibels in my data set. So was the significant effect I found, was it a coincidence? Or maybe my model was too sensitive for my data set? And as we saw in the previous slide, there's quite low spreading across the noise levels, and it's even lacking in high noise levels. So I found a statistical significant effect, but it doesn't necessarily mean this is also a biological significant effect. So to conclude, I found an effect, although it was really small. I found significant effect of increased frequency in maximum and center frequency. And though they are small effects, these are the first results regarding this matter found in Iceland. And with the huge data set we have available, I suggest to look deeper into it, putting more focus on periods with high noise levels, and maybe more visual data would also be useful, or if possible, and I think an experimental approach would be the most effective method. It is anyhow important to further investigate this matter to make sure measurements can be made to mitigate or to mitigate certain impacts or possible impacts to ensure the future of this population, and not only for the whales in this area, but across all the world, all cetaceans, whales and dolphins, because it's likely that anthropogenic noise in the ocean will keep increasing. Thank you very much.